My name is Kieran Voss, Chief Tactical Officer of the Zorath Dominion. We've conquered over a dozen star systems, watched civilizations crumble in mere hours, and celebrated victories that made lesser species beg for mercy. So when Earth appeared on our expansion charts, I expected the usual, swift, boring triumph. 3 days. That's all our Supreme Commander allowed the humans to surrender their planet. 3 standard cycles to fold or perish. Generous, I thought. Most civilizations would panic within the first hour. Our flagship, Iron Ascendant, hovered above the blue planet like a mountain of steel and fire. Thousands of warships surrounded it, missile carriers, plasma lances, orbital disruptors, enough power to erase a continent before breakfast. The bridge was casual. Officers joked. Some bet on how long it would take humans to capitulate. Captain Rail reclined, eyes tracing Earth's slow spin in the holographic display. 3 days, he smirked. They won't last 3 hours. The usual laughter followed. Commander Yura raised her glass of violet nectar. After the first city disappears, they'll surrender. Others chuckled, imagining the fear in human eyes. I stayed silent. Not fear, not respect. Boredom. Waste of time was my only concern. Then the mood shifted. Supreme Admiral Vorin entered. Silence fell instantly. Vorin was imposing, tall, blue-skinned, eyes like frozen steel. A commander who never laughed, never lost. He approached the holographic Earth. Send the message. A drone activated. The message was clear, precise, and merciless. Earth governments, you have 3 days to surrender. All defenses must stand down. Resistance will result in annihilation. It was broadcast in every language we could decipher. Then we waited. Hour 1 passed. No reply. Hour 2, still nothing. Captain Rail groaned. At least beg a little. Commander Yura chuckled, probably arguing which leader gets to surrender first. The officers laughed, amused by their own assumptions. Hour 3. Finally, a tiny shuttle rose from Earth, unarmed, unescorted. The bridge erupted in whispers and laughter. A diplomat? Someone scoffed. The shuttle docked with Iron Ascendant. Security teams escorted the lone human to the bridge. He looked ordinary. Medium height, dark hair, calm eyes, a simple black suit. No weapons, no armor, no panic. He walked as if to a meeting, not a room filled with conquerors. I leaned toward Rick, my communications officer. Is that it? Our last hope? Rick shrugged. The human stopped before Admiral Vorin. Silence stretched, tense and curious. Then Vorin spoke, his voice cold. You are the representative of Earth? The human nodded, calm and steady. Yes, I am Elias Harrow, ambassador. There was something about the way he stood, confident and unafraid, that made my blood run cold, not because he seemed dangerous, but because he seemed to already know how this encounter would end. He smiled, a small, calm smile that said more than words could. And then he said, "You should leave." For a moment, nobody reacted. Then laughter erupted across the bridge. But that smile wasn't just confidence, it was a warning. And somehow, I knew the humans had already won before we even realized the game had begun. The laughter on the bridge slowly died, replaced by a tense, uneasy silence. Admiral Vorin's jaw tightened as he studied Elias Arrow, the human ambassador. No fear in his eyes, no hesitation, just a calm, unshakable certainty that unnerved even the most battle-hardened officers on the bridge. Vorin's voice cut through the stillness. You misunderstand your position. You have 3 days to surrender, human. Stand down immediately or face annihilation. Harrow tilted his head, eyes scanning the immense holographic display of our fleet. Thousands of ships,
bristling with weapons, stretching across orbit like a web of steel. "I understand perfectly," he said evenly. "That's exactly why I'm here." A murmur ran through the officers. Captain Rahl scoffed audibly. "Here? To beg for mercy?" he laughed. Commander Yura's eyes narrowed. Maybe he's crazy enough to think he can negotiate terms. Harrow's smile widened, subtle, almost casual, but charged with something we couldn't name. "I'm not here to negotiate," he said. "I'm here to warn you." The room froze. To warn us? Against what? We had the largest fleet in known space. Every tactic, every weapon, every contingency prepared. What could a single human warn us about that we didn't already control? Harrow's gaze swept over the formation again. "You think Earth has 3 days. You're wrong. You won't last 3 seconds." At first, it sounded absurd, ludicrous, but there was a weight in his words, a certainty that made the officers exchange nervous glances. Even the usually unshakable Captain Rahl's confident smirk faltered. I leaned closer to my console, scanning Earth's defenses and fleet intelligence again. Nothing. Primitive ships, barely functional energy shields, weak warp drives. There was no reason to fear. Yet Harrow continued, calm, almost teasing. "Second one?" I frowned. My console blinked with strange readings. Energy spikes, small, subtle, but unmistakable, emanating not from Earth, but inside our own fleet. Red warning symbols flashed on every tactical screen simultaneously. Admiral Voran's icy voice demanded answers. "What is happening?" I don't know," I admitted, voice tight. "Energy fluctuations, millions of anomalies inside the ships, not external, internal." Harrow leaned against the holographic table, arms crossed, calm, unmoved, watching us like a theater audience watching the opening act. His eyes glimmered with amusement. 3. Done. Suddenly the alarm screamed, lights flashed red, systems failed in bursts across the bridge. Warships blinked out of sensor arrays, one, then another, then dozens. The officers froze, shouting into comms. The impossible was happening. Ships were disappearing, not destroyed, not firing, vanishing. Harrow's voice remained steady, almost conversational. "You've already lost, and this is only the beginning." The realization hit me like a shockwave. Humans hadn't just prepared, they had set a trap, invisible, silent, lethal. The bridge of the Iron Ascendant erupted into chaos, yet the ambassador stood as calm as ever, a single beacon of certainty amid the storm. And in that moment, I understood. The game wasn't about surviving 3 days. It was about surviving 3 seconds. Chaos consumed the bridge. Red lights flashed across every console, sirens screaming like a chorus of panic. Officers shouted into comm channels, their voices overlapping with static and alarms. I stared at the tactical displays, heart hammering. Ships weren't just disappearing, they were being dismantled from within. Engines, weapons, power cores, gone. No explosions, no battle, just nothing. Captain Rahl's chair scraped across the floor as he lunged toward his console. "Status report. Explain this." I swallowed hard, trying to analyze the data flooding my sensors. "They're gone, Captain. Systems offline. Not destroyed, removed. Our fleet, it's being consumed from the inside." Voran's usually icy composure cracked, his hands gripping the edge of the holographic table. "Impossible. We prepared for every attack, every trick, every deception. Nothing could—" Harrow interrupted, calm as ever. "Oh, it could, and it did." He gestured toward the fleet display. Millions, maybe billions of tiny shapes now blinking across our scanners. Microscopic machines, swarms moving through every vessel, silent, efficient, unstoppable. "Nanites," Commander Yura whispered, her voice trembling. "You mean microscopic machines? Inside every ship? Harrow nodded slightly. Human hospitality. The words didn't make sense immediately. Then it clicked. Months ago, our scouting drones had explored Earth's solar system. Standard procedure. They scanned, reported, and we dismissed it as reconnaissance. But the drones hadn't just observed. They had carried something back. Something deadly. Harrow's voice cut through the panic. We sent a small gift along your little scout. Self-replicating machines, adaptive, consuming everything in their path. I could barely breathe. The numbers on the display jumped. 30%, 40, 50. Ships blinking out of existence at an exponential rate. Officers screamed into comms, trying to regain control, but there was nothing they could do. Engines failed, reactors shut down, weapons systems dissolved. Voron's face turned a shade paler than his blue skin normally allowed. You cannot stop us, he growled. We will destroy you. Harrow tilted his head, a small, almost amused smirk forming. Destroy me? You've already lost. Captain Rahl muttered, disbelief in his voice. This can't be happening. Entire warships gone without a single shot, fired by Earth? Harrow straightened, checking a simple device on his wrist, some ancient human mechanism, a watch. 3 seconds, gentlemen. That's all it took. The bridge descended into complete pandemonium. Officers shouted orders that could not be carried out. Ships tried to escape, to jump to hyperspace, but the nanites anticipated every move, dismantling engines mid-jump. Panic spread like a contagion, faster than any weapon we had. I looked at Harrow, calm, smiling slightly, as if watching a show he had already rehearsed 1,000 times. The fleet, our pride, our power, our legacy, was unraveling in ways we could not comprehend. And yet, he hadn't even raised a finger. The human ambassador hadn't fought, hadn't fired a weapon, and yet he had already rewritten the rules of this battle. If this was only the beginning, I shivered to imagine what came next.
The bridge had become a scene from a nightmare. Officers ran from console to console, shouting incomprehensible orders into the comms, but the panic was useless. The nanites spread faster than any countermeasure we could deploy. Ships vanished like shadows swallowed by darkness, leaving only empty space in their wake. I barely had time to process what I saw when Captain Rahl shouted, "We're down to 50% of the fleet! 50! How is this possible?" His voice cracked as he banged the console. I forced myself to scan the tactical displays faster, but the numbers made my stomach twist. Each vessel disappeared without a trace. Weapon systems, shields, propulsion, nothing survived. The nanites were everywhere, moving, adapting, consuming. Voron's voice rose above the chaos, filled with an anger I had never heard before. "You dare challenge the Zorath Dominion, human? Explain this!" Harrow leaned casually against the holographic table, calm, smiling faintly. "I already did. Human preparation is long-term. We don't act until we know exactly what will happen." The officers exchanged bewildered glances. Human strategy? What was he talking about? Harrow continued, his tone casual, almost conversational, yet every word carried the weight of inevitability. Your fleet thought it was invincible. Your systems thought they were secure. But we simulate everything, all scenarios, every possible outcome, and we prepared for yours. I realized with horror what he meant. Every fleet deployment, every weapons test, every calculated maneuver, it had all been anticipated. Every flaw in our defenses had been exploited before we even stepped into orbit. Commander Yura's voice cracked. "You planned this? For years?" Harrow nodded. 22 years of simulations. Every invasion we've ever faced, every attack vector, every contingency, tested, retested, perfected. By the time you arrived, we were ready. Voron's hands clenched into fists. Simulations? This is real war. You dare trivialize it? Harrow smiled, a calm, chilling smile. War isn't about size or strength alone. It's about preparation, timing, and understanding your opponent better than they understand themselves. You've already lost because you assumed your power meant anything. I glanced at the tactical displays again. The disappearance rate had jumped to 70%. Entire battle groups vanished mid-flight. Communications with the remaining ships were failing. Some crews were panicking, others silent, frozen in disbelief. The unstoppable machines were everywhere, and there was no countermeasure we could deploy fast enough. Captain Rahl whispered, almost to himself, "How could a single species, no, a single person do this?" Harrow's eyes flicked toward him, calm, amused. Not a single person, a species. Every human alive contributed, even indirectly. Preparation is collective. The realization hit me like a punch to the chest. This wasn't just technology. This was strategy, foresight, and patience honed over generations. We hadn't been fighting humans. We'd been fighting centuries of human planning, and we had walked straight into it. And as the bridge descended further into chaos, I understood something terrifying. We had never been the hunters. We were the prey, and the humans had been waiting for us all along.
The alarms were deafening now, a relentless chorus of panic and failure echoing across the bridge. Officers ran in every direction, issuing frantic orders, but the nanites ignored every command, moving faster than any countermeasure could reach them. Our most powerful warships were disassembling themselves before our eyes. Hull plating disappeared, reactors emptied, weapons vanished. Every tactical advantage we had built over decades evaporated in moments. Captain Rahl's face had gone pale, sweat dripping down his brow. "We've lost 80% of the fleet," he shouted, voice trembling. 80! And it's still spreading! Commander Yura's fingers trembled as she scrolled through sensor readings. "It's not stopping. Wherever the nanites go, systems fail. They're adapting, learning. There's nothing left to control." Admiral Voron turned toward Harrow, rage and disbelief warring in his icy blue eyes. "Explain! This isn't possible! You cannot have prepared for every outcome." Harrow's smile was slight, almost polite. "You underestimate us. Humans don't just react. We anticipate. We simulate. Every threat, every possibility, every war you could imagine, we've already prepared a solution." The tactical displays were a nightmare of blinking red alerts. Ships vanished mid-orbit, entire formations gone, leaving nothing but silence where pride and firepower had once dominated. I leaned closer to my console, scanning the signals again. "It's not just destruction," I said, quietly, my voice barely audible. "They're reorganizing. The nanites aren't random. They're restructuring the fleet's remains into something else." "Something else?" Captain Rahl repeated, disbelief and fear in his voice. Harrow's calm tone cut through the panic. "Yes, humans waste nothing. Every resource, every scrap, every piece of technology, even your own, can serve a purpose. What you see disappearing is only the beginning of what will be repurposed." Voron's fists clenched tighter, knuckles turning white against his pale skin. "You dare use our technology against us?" Harrow's dark eyes glimmered with amusement. "Not just use it, improve it, integrate it. And you've done all the work for us." The remaining fleet tried to respond, to coordinate, but the nanites anticipated every move. Weapons systems jammed mid-firing, engines failed mid-jump, shields collapsed mid-defense. Even the command networks were compromised. Panic turned into terror, and terror into paralysis. I looked at the ambassador, standing casually with his hands behind his back, his composure unshaken. Somehow he radiated control in a storm of chaos. He hadn't moved a single ship, fired a single shot, or uttered a command, and yet he had already won. The remaining officers exchanged wide-eyed glances, whispering frantically to each other. The words impossible and overpowered echoed repeatedly. Harrow's voice was calm, but carried across the bridge like a prophecy. You believed your fleet meant victory. You believed strength alone decided wars. You were wrong. I swallowed, my throat dry. My hands trembled as I realized the full scope. The Zorath Dominion, the pride of our civilization, was collapsing without a single human ship in orbit. And in that terrifying moment, I understood the truth. Humans hadn't just defeated us, they had rewritten the rules of engagement entirely, and the real battle hadn't even begun. The bridge had turned into a battlefield of nerves. Every officer, every crew member was frozen in disbelief or screaming into comms they knew would never respond. Red alerts flashed across all consoles as the nanites advanced like an invisible tide, devouring what remained of our fleet with terrifying precision. Captain Rawls' voice cracked. We're down to 30% of operational ships. 30! How is this possible? I forced my fingers to move across my console, scanning for patterns, for a single clue, anything that could explain how a lone human, or a planet of humans, could render our overwhelming power meaningless. But the data made no sense. The nanites weren't just consuming, they were organizing. They moved with purpose, efficiency, almost intelligence, adapting faster than any AI in our command protocols could predict. Commander Yura's voice shook. It's like they know our every move before we even make it. There's no way to fight back. Admiral Voron's anger had reached a boiling point. Harrow, you will pay for this. Explain what you've done. Harrow's calm smile barely shifted. Explain? The proof is right in front of you. You built the weapons. You built the ships. You brought them into space yourself. We simply improved them and waited. The realization hit us like a hammer. The humans hadn't just defended Earth. They had weaponized our own fleet against us. Our pride, our strength, our invincible armada, reduced to prey under the careful control of a single ambassador. I watched as tactical displays showed entire squadrons vanishing mid-orbit, hundreds of ships gone in seconds, leaving nothing but the faintest echoes of energy signatures. The officers were shouting now, frantically attempting maneuvers that the nanites effortlessly countered. Engines died mid-jump, reactors shut down mid-ignition, weapons disintegrated in mid-fire. Voron's pale blue skin had drained further. This is unacceptable. You cannot possibly have prepared for all contingencies. Harrow's gaze remained steady, almost casual. Oh, but we have. 22 years of simulations, every invasion attempt we've faced, every attack scenario imaginable. We tested them all, over and over. By the time your fleet arrived, the outcome was already decided. Captain Rawls' voice was barely a whisper. We didn't even see it coming. I could feel it too. Our dominance, our experience, our history of conquering star systems. It meant nothing here. The humans had redefined war. It wasn't about fleets or weapons. It was about preparation, patience, and foresight. And now, as the last functional systems in our remaining ships flickered and failed, I realized the most terrifying truth. Earth hadn't even deployed its fleet yet. All of this destruction, all of this chaos had been orchestrated without a single human warship in space. Harrow glanced at his ancient watch again, calmly, almost playfully. 3 seconds, gentlemen. That's all it took. The officers were speechless. Voron's face twisted with rage, disbelief, and fear. The bridge had gone silent, except for the soft hum of failing systems and the quiet, unstoppable advance of our own annihilation. And as I watched the remnants of the once great fleet dissolve, I understood something horrifying. Humans hadn't just fought the battle. They had already won it months ago. The real question now, what comes next? The bridge was quiet now, but not in relief. The silence was heavy, filled with the eerie hum of failing systems and the dread of what we had unleashed upon ourselves. The remaining ships drifted like corpses in orbit, powerless and empty. Officers clutched consoles, scanning, shouting, hoping for a miracle that wouldn't come. Harrow didn't move a muscle. He stood at the center, calm, almost regal, his eyes surveying the chaos with the confidence of someone who had seen the ending before the story began. "You assumed your strength meant safety," he said softly, almost to himself. "But you underestimated preparation, patience, and understanding your opponent." Voron's rage had reached a fever pitch. "You think this is over? You think a few machines can undo decades of power?" Harrow's smile was faint, but deliberate. "This isn't a few machines. This is human ingenuity. Every flaw in your fleet anticipated, every weakness exploited, and now the pieces are mine to arrange." I watched in disbelief as the nanites, millions of them, began reorganizing the remains of our fleet. Hull fragments and broken reactors shifting, combining into new shapes, patterns forming symbols, structures, something that made no sense at first. "What is it doing?" Captain Rawl asked, voice trembling. Harrow stepped closer to the holographic table. "Humans don't just destroy, we create. You've seen what happens when we fight, but this is the lesson you'll never forget." The shattered remnants of our armada began to take on massive, structured forms. 3 enormous shapes emerged from the wreckage, each pulsing with energy. From the bridge, we could see them clearly, shapes resembling letters, symbols. They were massive, constructed entirely from the remains of our own ships. Voron's voice dropped to a whisper, disbelief and anger intertwining. "Human letters? You've made a message?" Harrow's dark eyes glinted. "Yes, a message, and it's simple. Run." A chill ran through the bridge. The symbol formation was more than warning. It was a statement. Every surviving officer, every remaining crew member could see it clearly. Our most powerful fleet had been disassembled, repurposed, and transformed into a single silent command: flee. I turned back to my console, trying to process the magnitude. This wasn't just destruction. This was psychological warfare, strategic domination, and resource manipulation all at once. Every decision we made, every plan we executed, had been anticipated, countered, and nullified. Voron's fists were white with strain. You tricked us. You invaded our minds, our systems, and you've already won." Harrow nodded calmly. "We didn't invade. We prepared. Humans plan for everything. The rest is just theater." Even Captain Rawl's bravado was gone. We didn't just lose the fleet. We didn't even see the battle start. Harrow glanced at his watch again. Tick, tick, tick. The soft sound echoed in the bridge, marking time in a way that was almost mocking. 3 seconds, gentlemen, and now the stage is set. The officers stared at him, silent, helpless. The remaining fleet drifted, useless and broken, while the human ambassador stood untouched, unchallenged, and utterly in control. And as I realized the full scope of what had just occurred, I understood the truth. The humans hadn't merely fought, they had orchestrated everything months ago, and what came next would be far beyond anything we had imagined. The bridge felt hollow, as if the life had been drained from it. The remaining officers clutched consoles, staring at the slowly drifting remnants of the fleet. Ships that had once represented the might of the Zorath Dominion were now nothing more than floating scrap. The energy readings were erratic, strange, almost alive. I kept scanning the tactical feeds, trying to understand what the human ambassador, Elias Harrow, had really done. The nanites had dismantled our fleet, yes, but now they were reorganizing, constructing massive formations that seemed purposeful, deliberate. The shapes weren't random. They were a warning, a message, a display of control that went beyond destruction. Vorin's pale blue eyes burned with a mix of fury and disbelief. This is impossible. Our fleet was unparalleled, our strategy perfect. How could one species, one human, turn it all against us? Harrow leaned casually on the holographic table. You overestimate your own importance. It's not about perfection, it's about preparation. You assumed space superiority meant victory. You forgot that intelligence, patience, and foresight can outweigh raw power. Commander Ura's voice quivered. They're using our own fleet to make something, a structure, a display. What are they building? I looked closer at the tactical holograms. The nanites were repurposing ships and debris into enormous constructs, each resembling geometric symbols that hovered in orbit. Their scale was unimaginable, hundreds of kilometers across, and they radiated energy pulses that our sensors could barely track. Captain Rao's voice was a trembling whisper. It's like they're showing us our own failure. Harrow's dark eyes glinted. Exactly. Humans don't just destroy, we teach. And sometimes the lesson comes without bloodshed, without conventional combat. We prepare, we wait, and when the time is right, the consequences speak for themselves. Vorin's fists clenched, his teeth bared in anger. You think this will stop us? You think destroying our pride will make us surrender? Harrow's smile was slight, calm, almost casual. I didn't destroy your pride. I exposed it. Every weakness you believed hidden, every assumption about your strength, invalid. You didn't fight humans. You fought foresight, patience, and planning honed over centuries, and you lost. The remaining fleet tried to respond, but the nanites anticipated every movement. Even attempts to escape were futile. Engines died mid-jump, reactors shut down mid-ignition, weapons dissolved mid-fire. Every command we issued was neutralized before it could take effect. I realized something chilling. The humans hadn't just neutralized us, they had turned every advantage we thought we had against ourselves. Our pride, our arrogance, our experience in warfare, it all worked for them. Harrow glanced at his watch, quietly marking time, tick by tick. 3 seconds, he said softly, almost as if testing us. And now the stage is ready. What you do next is entirely up to you. The officer stared at him, helpless. The remaining fleet drifted silently, broken and powerless. And yet the human ambassador stood, calm, poised, and utterly in control. And in that moment, I realized the full scale of human cunning. The battle wasn't just about survival, it was about teaching an empire what it had never truly understood. The bridge had fallen into an uneasy, tense silence. Officers still clung to consoles, but their eyes betrayed something far worse than fear: helplessness. Every attempt to salvage control of the fleet failed. The nanites moved with uncanny intelligence, dismantling, reconstructing, repurposing. What remained of our once proud armada was now a chaotic collection of drifting hulls, gradually being absorbed into new formations that we could barely comprehend. Captain Rao's voice cracked as he stared at the tactical displays. We can't even track what's happening. Entire fleets just vanish. Engines, weapons, communications, all gone. How is this possible? I looked over the readings again. The energy spikes weren't random. The nanites were organized, forming massive geometric structures in orbit round Earth. Pulses of energy radiated from these structures, interfering with our sensors, feeding the chaos. Commander Yura's hand shook as she scrolled through her consoles. They're using our own ships against us, and somehow it's growing. I don't understand. It's like intelligence, purpose. Voron's pale blue face was tight with rage. This is unacceptable. You cannot have planned for every eventuality. This is impossible. Harrow finally spoke, calm, deliberate, almost serene. Impossible? No. You misjudged humans. You assumed superiority comes from size, from technology, from firepower. We have centuries of patience, simulations, and foresight. That alone is enough to topple fleets like yours. I swallowed hard, realizing the truth in his words. This was not just a battle of firepower. This was a war of planning, anticipation, and strategy so meticulous it had rendered our armada irrelevant before it even fired a shot. Rahl muttered under his breath, disbelief in his voice. We didn't even see the battle begin, and we've already lost. Harrow's eyes gleamed with quiet amusement. Exactly. Humans rarely fight blindly. We study, we prepare, and when the time comes, the consequences are inevitable. You didn't just underestimate us, you overestimated yourselves. On the tactical displays, the remaining warships were being enveloped by swarms of nanites. Entire sections of the fleet vanished mid-flight. Ships tried emergency jumps, but engines failed or shut down mid-transit. Weapons dissolved. Nothing could resist the nanites' silent assault. I realized with a sinking feeling that this was more than destruction. This was reshaping. Our pride, our dominance, our carefully engineered fleet, they were all being transformed into something else, something we couldn't yet understand. Voron's voice shook. You think you've won? You think destroying our fleet and exposing our weaknesses will be enough? Harrow's calm tone didn't waver. This isn't the end, Admiral. This is only the beginning, and the lesson is clear. Underestimate humans at your own peril. The bridge was silent now, except for the soft hum of the remaining systems and the faint, almost imperceptible pulse of energy radiating from the growing structures in orbit around Earth. Every officer understood their empire had just been taught a lesson they would never forget. And as the final systems flickered and failed, I realized the most terrifying truth. This wasn't a battle for Earth alone. It was a demonstration of human strategy that could challenge the very concept of domination itself. The bridge felt like a tomb. Red alarms still blared intermittently, but their urgency was muted now, drowned out by the weight of inevitability. The remaining ships drifted, powerless, slowly being consumed and reshaped by the swarms of nanites. Every tactical display was a testament to defeat. Formations we once controlled were now nothing but tools for someone else's purpose. Captain Rahl's voice trembled as he stared at the displays. They're not just destroying, they're building something, using what remains of our fleet to make something. I nodded grimly, unable to take my eyes off the holographic display. The nanites had already formed 3 massive structures, each more imposing than the last, pulsing with energy. The sheer scale was incomprehensible, hundreds of kilometers across, constructed entirely from the remnants of our armada. Voron's voice was low, trembling with anger and disbelief. You've made a statement, using our ships as instruments of your lesson? Harrow's calm smile did not waver. Not a lesson, a demonstration. Humans rarely fight blindly. We anticipate, we simulate. Every contingency, every response, Every arrogance you brought to this battle, accounted for, neutralized, and repurposed. Commander Yura's voice shook. But why? You could have destroyed us entirely. Why show this? Harrow's eyes glinted. Because we never waste resources. Humans don't just eliminate threats. We convert, improve, and learn. You provided the material, I provided the instruction, and now the message is clear. Underestimate us, and you will fail before the battle even begins. I scanned the tactical displays again. Even the remaining functional ships were being enveloped by nanites, engines failing, weapons dissolving mid-charge, communications severed. Nothing survived unscathed. Each failed maneuver only allowed the nanites to restructure and expand their influence. Captain Rawl muttered under his breath, disbelief evident. We didn't even see it start, and we've already lost everything. Harrow's calm tone carried across the bridge, almost serene. You didn't fight humans. You fought centuries of preparation, simulations, and strategy. That is enough to render any armada irrelevant. Voron's fists clenched, his pale skin straining against the tension. And what next? You think this ends with these symbols in orbit? That this will stop me? Harrow glanced at his ancient wristwatch, the faint ticking audible in the silent bridge. This isn't the end. This is the beginning of a new order. You've learned your place. Now everything else is optional. Decide wisely. I swallowed hard. The remaining fleet was powerless. The bridge was paralyzed by shock, fear, and disbelief. And yet, Harrow stood there, unarmed, unarmored, untouchable in his calm authority. He hadn't fired a single shot. He hadn't issued a single command, and still he controlled the battlefield. And as the energy from the massive structures pulsed outward, I realized the terrifying truth. Earth hadn't merely survived. It had rewritten the rules of warfare, and nothing the Zorath Dominion had ever known could stop what came next. The bridge was barely recognizable. Officers huddled in corners, some staring blankly at flickering displays, others desperately trying to salvage what little control remained. The pulse of energy from the massive structures built from our own fleet radiated through space like a silent drumbeat, marking our defeat. Captain Rawl's voice was hoarse from shouting orders that went ignored. All remaining ships, fall back! Attempt emergency hyperspace jumps! I scanned the consoles. Engines sputtered. Weapons systems dissolved mid-charge. Comm networks were in shambles. The nanites anticipated every maneuver, every reaction, turning our desperate attempts into fuel for their growing structures. Nothing escaped. Nothing survived. Voron's face was pale, a mixture of rage and disbelief twisting his features. Harrow, you've destroyed our pride, our fleet, our legacy. Tell me how this is possible. Harrow's dark eyes sparkled with that calm amusement of his. Possible? You simply underestimated what humans can do. You assumed power is measured by numbers, by technology, by intimidation. You never accounted for foresight, preparation, and collective strategy perfected over generations. Commander Yura's hands trembled as she pointed to the tactical display. They're reorganizing the remains into some sort of command structure. They're learning from us, adapting instantly. Harrow nodded subtly. Not learning, already prepared. Every scenario, every contingency, every possible weakness, mapped, simulated, and accounted for. You walked into a battle you didn't even know had started months ago. I swallowed hard. It was true. We had never been the hunters. We had been prey, led into a trap we didn't even realize existed. Voron's voice became almost a growl. And after this, what next? You've shown your superiority. But the rest of the Dominion will respond. We will rebuild. We will retaliate. Harrow's smile remained calm, composed, almost faintly amused. Perhaps, but remember this. Humans don't just fight. We anticipate. We prepare. And when the moment comes, the results are inevitable. I watched in disbelief as the nanites, billions of them, completed the final phases of their work. The floating wreckage of our fleet had transformed into enormous, imposing structures, arranged into symbols, patterns, and formations that radiated an unmistakable message. Run. Rawl whispered, voice shaking. We didn't even fight, and we've already lost everything. Harrow's eyes flicked to his watch. Tick, tick, tick. Each second measured like a judge's gavel. 3 seconds, he said softly. And now the stage is set. Your next move is entirely yours. But remember, the advantage was never yours to begin with. The remaining officers were silent, their minds processing the scale of what had just happened. The fleet, the pride of the Zorath Dominion, had been neutralized, transformed, and used as a lesson. I felt a chill. Humans hadn't just won a battle, they had rewritten what victory meant. And as the pulse of energy from the massive structures faded into orbit, I understood the final, terrifying truth. Earth hadn't just defended itself, it had established its supremacy before we even realized a fight had begun. The bridge was silent now. The remaining officers stared at the massive structures orbiting Earth, constructed entirely from the remnants of our once mighty fleet. The energy radiating from them hummed with quiet authority, a reminder that every attempt at domination had been nullified before it began. Admiral Voron's jaw was tight, his fists clenched, his entire body radiating rage and disbelief. He had led the most powerful armada the galaxy had ever seen, and it had been reduced to driftwood in orbit around a single blue planet. Harrow stepped forward, calm, measured, yet commanding in every movement. You came expecting a quick victory, and you brought everything you had. What you failed to realize was that humans prepare, we anticipate, we plan, and sometimes the only weapons we need are patience and foresight. I finally found my voice, hoarse from the chaos and fear. All of this, done without firing a single human ship? Harrow's smile was subtle, almost amused. Sometimes the greatest victories are won before the battle ever begins. We didn't need to fight yet. The battle had been decided months ago. Voron's eyes blazed. This is humiliating. Our pride, our fleets, our strategy, all gone. You've stolen everything. Harrow shook his head gently. Not stolen, reclaimed. You created the resources. We merely guided them to their purpose. Nothing wasted, nothing destroyed unnecessarily. Humans hate waste, and above all, we never underestimate. I scanned the displays one last time. The fleet was gone. Every operational ship lost or disabled, repurposed into massive structures that spelled the message we couldn't ignore: run. Every remaining Zorath officer felt it, even if none admitted it. Our empire had been humiliated, and Earth's supremacy was absolute. Captain Rawl whispered, disbelief and awe mixing in his voice. We can't retaliate. Not now, not ever. They planned everything before we even arrived. We were never in control. Harrow straightened, glancing once more at the colossal formations in orbit. The message is clear. The galaxy will learn it soon enough. Humans don't just survive. We dominate through understanding, patience, and foresight. This was never about war. It was about teaching a lesson you will never forget. Voron's shoulders slumped slightly, the first sign of defeat I had ever seen from him. For the first time, silence wasn't just a pause between alarms, it was finality. Harrow turned to leave the bridge, his presence calm, composed, utterly untouchable. "You have 3 days," he said softly. A pause, a faint smile, "to reconsider your place in the galaxy." And with that, he walked out, leaving the most powerful fleet in our empire reduced to nothing more than floating scrap, and leaving us with a terrifying realization: humans hadn't just defended themselves, they had redefined the rules of warfare entirely, and the Zorath Dominion would never be the same again. In that moment, I understood a truth more chilling than defeat. Humans were not merely survivors, they were strategists, visionaries, and masters of patience. The galaxy had witnessed a quiet revolution, and the lesson was clear: never underestimate the seemingly ordinary. And as the last alarms died away, I realized one terrifying fact: Earth hadn't just defended itself, it had already claimed the upper hand in a game no one else even knew had begun. May this message strengthen your faith and renew your hope. Thank you for staying until the end. If this touched your heart, like, share, and subscribe to Astro Realms for more uplifting content. May God's blessings overflow in your life. See you soon.